In today's video, we're going to be breaking down Kyle Williams of Washington State. What are his strengths and weaknesses? How do we think he's best utilized at the NFL level? Where do we think he goes? How does he grade out? And finally, what do we think we can expect from him in fantasy? Watch to the end of this video and you'll have a good idea. Taking a look at his projected height and weight, PFF has him as 6 foot 186. I think Garrett Wilson in terms of the build, both are 6 foot, but Garrett was about 183 at the time of the combine. In terms of his profile here, you can definitely see that he's going to be a little bit of an older prospect. He is a fifth-year player. You'll see that as a true freshman at UNLV, on 52 targets, he had 35 receptions, 426 receiving yards on 12.2 per catch, and 2 receiving touchdowns. Then you saw as a sophomore, he stepped it up a little bit, but not tremendously, to be honest with you. And so he went from 52 to 72 targets, 35 to 42 receptions, 426 to 601 receiving yards, and still had 2 touchdowns, but did see his yards per catch go from 12.2 up to 14.3. So improvement pretty much across the board, but marginally. Then as a true junior, we saw his production dip a little bit. He went from 72 to 66 targets, 42 to 40 receptions, 601 to 541 receiving yards. His yards per catch also went down from 14.3 to 13.5. He did happen to score 5 touchdowns, so that was a career high. Then we saw growth across the board as a senior at Washington State when he transferred. He went from 66 to 85 targets, 40 to 61 receptions, 541 to 842 receiving yards. His yards per reception went up from 13.5 to 13.8, and he went from 5 to 6 touchdowns. But as a fifth-year player, which definitely is late for having a breakout season, his production skyrocketed. And so he went from 85 to 101 targets, 61 to 70 receptions, 842 to 1196 receiving yards. He set a career high with 17.1 yards per reception and a career high with 14 total touchdowns, including by far his best PFF receiving grade of 82.1. Taking a look at some advanced stats here, among draft-eligible FBS wide receivers with at least 75 targets, that was a sample size of 82 here, Williams ran 441 routes, which is 93.8% of the team routes this season. When you take a look at his deployment, he played 25.3% of the time in the slot and 74% of the time out wide. Taking a look at his yards per out run, his 2.71 were 10th in the sample size, tied for 10th. Pretty impressive. His PFF receiving grade of 82.1 was 15th. We like that. Look at his yak per reception, though. His 8.4 are first in the sample size. That is no mistake. I'll explain that in the grading part later. Taking a look at his missed tackles forced, his 20 were tied for 11th. That's not a mistake as well. His contested catch percentage of 62.5%, 10 out of 16, is incredibly impressive. Looking at his targets and targets per game, he had 101 on the season and 7.8 per game. Decent. His 70 receptions and 5.4 per game are decent as well. His 1,196 yards and 92 per game are good. And his 14 touchdowns on 1.1 per game are rather impressive. Taking a look at how he performed specifically versus man and zone, his PFF grade versus man of 89.7 was 4th in the sample size, and his 4.39 yards per out run versus man were 3rd. He is adept at beating man coverage. He is an insane athlete. Taking a look at his PFF grade versus zone and yards per out run versus zone, his 75 PFF grade versus zone was 36th in the sample size, and his yards per out run versus zone of 2.29 were 46th. I will say, I do think he's a little bit better at man than zone, but he can find the soft spots in zone coverage. He's an intelligent player, so don't take that as he's a poor player against zone. Taking a look at his PFF grade on screens, his 94.5 score was 8th in the sample size. He is a very good yards after catch guy. You've seen that with the yards after catch, the missed tackles forced. It's all there with him. Taking a look at his PFF grade in the slot, his 87.3 grade was 9th in the sample size. That's right, not only can he win outside, he can definitely win in the slot as well. And his 47 first downs caught were tied for 15th in the sample size. And so what are we to think of Kyle Williams? Well, remember that he's a fifth-year senior out of Washington State. He did transfer there as a senior. He's give or take 6 foot 186, and so that's a build similar to that of Garrett Wilson, who was 6 foot 183. My valuation, I think he's worthy of a second-round pick. My comparison, funnily enough, is Garrett Wilson, and I think he's a Garrett Wilson type of player. And so he's like Garrett Wilson in that he's a quick accelerator. He is ridiculous after the catch. Remember his marks in missed tackles forced, yak per reception, and PFF grade on screens were all really, really high. We're talking elite scores. But the one thing is he just doesn't have the hands that Garrett Wilson does. In contested catch situations, he's pretty good, but he has a lot of concentration drops, which you'll see in the worries/limitations below. And as far as his short route running goes, I gave him a 4 out of 5. His ability to find himself immediately open on slants with his diamond release, which is ridiculous, shallow crosses and speed outs is insane. His separation on speed outs is one of the best in the class for sure. And remember, on the hitches, his snap down is insane, and he immediately can turn up field. He is a ridiculous athlete. In terms of his medium route running, I gave him a 3.5. He has a relatively good feel for the soft spots and zone coverage, can run a decent dig and a 10-yard out. I will say the separation on the medium routes isn't quite as good as it is on the short routes. I think his uh, acceleration is really good, but I think once he really gets going is when he's best. But once again, this is above average in terms of his medium route running. As far as his deep route running goes, I gave him a 4 out of 5. It is insane. There were plenty of reps, even on run plays, where the cornerback in front of him was so worried about him that, 4 seconds into a run play, the corner had no idea that it was a run play. That's how concerned he was with getting toasted. And even on run plays, he has a speed release to the outside that if you don't get a hand or if you just are not prepared for him, or especially if you're trying to press this guy and you miss, you are toasted. Uh, his feet off the line are also absolutely incredible. He stacks with ease. I think he's a faster player than he is quick, but he is very quick as well. In terms of his double moves, I didn't really see too many, but based on his athleticism, I really don't think we have anything to worry about. But I'm also not just going to give somebody a 5 out of 5 if I don't really see too much of it on film. In terms of his releases, I gave him a 4.5 out of 5. It's insane. There was this slant route on the goal line where he did this diamond release. It was flawless technique. He turned the cornerback completely around, immediately had 2 or 3 yards of separation. I'm serious. His releases, his get off the line of scrimmage is insane. His feet are masterful. In terms of his speed, I gave him a 9 out of 10. He's projected to be a mid 4.4s player. I really think he's going to score in the high 4.3s, probably a 4.37 to 4.39. He is very, very fast. You will see on film, he stacks vertically with ease. And the more he gets going in a straight line, the further or the more separation he has between the trailing cornerback. Now, in terms of his acceleration, I gave him an 8.5 out of 10. While I think that he's ultimately faster than he is quick, he is very, very quick. There is going to be no concern about his ability to separate due to speed. In terms of his deceleration, his snap down on the hitch route is one of the better ones in the class. I wouldn't say maybe quite as good as Royals, potentially Luther Burden, but it is very, very good. And it is going to be an asset to him because he can stack vertically, so he's going to strike fear in defenders and be able to snap down quickly and gain tons of separation. And that's also going to help him vertically as well. In terms of his agility, I gave him a 3.5 out of 5. While he is very good at maximizing yards after the catch, he isn't per se the shiftiest in terms of cutting and juking people out. But I would say it's still above average, which is why he gets a 3.5 out of 5. But his change of direction is a 4 out of 5. His route running is going to be extremely good at the NFL level. He can flip the field with relative ease. And it's just a remarkably fluid athlete all around, as you can see with the scores and athleticism. As far as his catching goes, I gave him a 3 out of 5. He has 21 drops on 376 career targets. These are concentration drops because he can make difficult catches. And his catch in traffic, I gave him a 3.5 out of 5 because he has a 50.8 career contested catch rate. And so it's a little bit bewildering, and it really is concentration drops. It's not that he's unable rather to catch the ball in traffic. He's relatively good and above average there. But the concentration drops, you gotta lower those significantly at the NFL level. But 21 drops sounds like a lot more, but if he had played 3 seasons, the drops would have been significantly fewer. But still, definitely an issue to be fair. In terms of his run after catch, I gave him a 4.5 out of 5. He is very, very good after the catch. Remember that he was the highest ranking yak per reception guy in this entire sample size of draft eligible wide receivers with 75 plus targets. He's smooth after the catch. He maximizes space. He's very good at following his blockers. He manipulatively accelerates and decelerates to maximize yardage. This guy is going to be very good at the NFL level after the catch. In terms of his dog factor, I give him a 4 out of 5. He's not the most physically imposing player, which is why he doesn't get a perfect score. But in terms of fearlessness and just general dogness and how he behaves on the field, he's going to be a problem for people if he gets playing time. In terms of his analytics, it did take him 5 years to get his first 1,000-yard receiving season, as well as his first 10 plus touchdown season as well. So he's going to get a 6.5 out of 10. They're definitely better profiles. But, some of these guys just don't even have a season like this, no matter how long they've been in the league or in college, rather. In terms of his projected draft capital, he is a projected fifth round pick. So we don't really like the draft capital per se, but I do think that he should be a riser, especially after he runs at the combine. I think he is going to have very good combine numbers. Even if he just does a pro day, I still think the same thing. And as far as his XZ and slot ability, he has absolute true positional versatility. In terms of being an X, he can stack vertically. He has a ridiculous speed release. He has the diamond release in the short area of the field to be on the outside along the goal line. As far as the Z is concerned, you can put him in motion, get him a running head start. Yeah, if you do that, defenses are pretty cooked. And then in the slot, you saw how good his PFF receiving grade was. Well, I don't always agree with everything PFF says for sure. That is an accurate grade, let me tell you. And so he is going to be dangerous no matter where he's deployed. Now, in terms of his worries slash limitations, he did have 21 drops in 5 seasons. These are concentration drops because his career contested catch rate was 50%. So the catch point isn't per se an issue. It's you just got to get more consistent. Work, get on the jugs machine. And then he is an older prospect. He's a fifth-year player. Typically, late breakouts, it's just a red flag, but some players are able to overcome that. It's just, once again, that is going to be a reason you can probably get him later in your drafts. He's a relatively unknown player. I didn't know about him too long ago. So overall, though, I was nothing but impressed with him. And so, where does he rank among his contemporaries in the 25 class, as well as the 24 class stacked on top of each other? Well, I think that he is a good tier wide receiver, in the Pearsall, Troy Franklin, and Xavier Legette tier. And so, Neighbors and Hunter are the only elite players in which I've graded at the receiver position in the last 2 seasons. Then I think Harrison Jr., McMillan, Odunze, BTJ, Jalen Rolls, and Luther Burden are all great prospects. Then I think the upper half of the good tier of prospects include A.D. Mitchell, Lad McConkey, Emeka Egbuka, and Isaiah Bond. And once again, I think he's in decent company with Ricky Pearsall, Troy Franklin, and Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette, we'll see if he works out long term. Troy Franklin, he looked a lot better in college. He just wasn't the athlete some of us thought he was going to be. And then Pearsall, I think, definitely came on strong at the end of the season, and I think has a bright future ahead of him. And he really just barely missed the mark with some of these upper tier of the good tier wide receivers. And then I definitely think that he's a significant tier above some of these other guys like Roman Wilson, Polk, Jalen McMillan, Coleman, Worthy, Burton, and Devontae Walker, and miles ahead of Malachi Corley, Washington, and McCaffrey. And remember that he's 6 foot 186. He is a senior. By valuation, I think he's worthy of a second round pick. My comp, I think he's a Garrett Wilson type of player. He is an incredible athlete, fluid after the catch. The snap down on his hitches is incredible. He's going to excel at beating man coverage, and he can find the soft spots in zone. He is a Garrett Wilson type of player. And remember that my official grade is a 77 out of 100. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Major Jack, and Infamy MTG. If you would like to become a member, I'm going to leave a link in the comment section. As far as what you'll gain, you'll get access to a private Discord server. I'm going to have a real life and fantasy football chat where we talk about real life NFL news. Any questions you might have will be answered in the real life NFL chat. And as far as the fantasy football chat, we'll talk about what's happening in the fantasy world. I'll give you team reviews, give you optimal roster construction based on your specific league settings, trades you can make to strengthen your roster, buying and selling points, specifically price points for various players based on your positions of need. I'll give you a special shout out, obviously, on all of these videos. You'll get early access to videos. You'll be part of private live streams that are not available to regular YouTube members. And you will also have the ability to suggest videos specifically for you on Patreon. I've already made one on Isaac Rendo as per request by one of my Patreon members. And so once again, if you would like to join, the link is going to be in the comment section. Thanks.